Hey everybody, new school comic books. Okay, let's just jump into it here. So the first thing I have is Twilight Children by Gilbert Hernandez and Darren Cook with Dave Stewart doing colors. I like this. It was very intriguing. The story is kind of hard to describe. Basically, we're introduced to the various characters in this, I guess, a small um, South American or Latin American town. Maybe it's Mexico. Maybe it's a border town. Maybe I don't know if it'd actually be a border town, but we meet this young couple, and the wife is having an affair with the fisherman. There's an old drunk. There are these three neighborhood kids who kind of get into well, they don't really get into mischief, but they're kind of precocious little kids. And what happens is every now and then it seems like a mysterious glowing ball rises up out of the ocean, and it's kind of there, and people aren't too sure what to make of it. And I guess it's happened before, and people are kind of getting used to it. They don't really know like I said, what to make of it, and it previously would just sort of fade away by morning time. But I guess in this particular issue, what happens is one particular time it doesn't fade away, it stays, and then weird things start happening. So yeah, it was really interesting. I like definitely like the art, like the colors. It was a good setup. Like I said, it's mostly an introduction to these characters and what's going on. There's a government scientist comes to check everything out, and some of the townspeople are kind of like giving him the stink eye. They don't know sure what to make of him. So I think it's going to be a pretty interesting story. So I'm definitely going to check out the next issue. Next thing I got here is Strange Fruit by G.J. Jones and Mark Waid. It's been a couple months since the first issue came out. The first issue was semi-controversial, I think, mostly because of an article that was written by someone, and I did read that particular article. I can't remember the author's name, and I kind of saw where she was coming from, but I think she made a few assumptions and jumped to a few conclusions. I can say, speaking for myself, I wasn't really offended by anything in the last issue. I just actually thought, as a comic book, just as a piece of entertainment, it was kind of meh. This particular issue is a little bit better as we get into the plot a little bit more. Basically, our mysterious stranger from outer space has kind of wandered into town. He's wearing the Confederate flag around his waist, and it seems he doesn't quite understand English or the language, but he wanders into a public library, and he sits in the whites only section, and he's trying to read, and it looks like he's trying to figure out the words and trying to figure out the language and things, but the authorities come and they take him to jail. The guy that the hero saved last issue was in jail as well. And meanwhile, the town is getting ready for this big storm that's coming. There's all this talk about how the levee is probably not going to hold. A man from the I can't remember if he was from Washington or from the government has come to sort of help out. That's this guy here, but we're kind of wondering if he's actually going to be allowed to help, just because, and if I didn't mention it, well, I didn't mention it, but the comic is set in Jim Crow era South, so obviously all these sort of things are going to come to play as far as race and politics, and of course the science fiction elements and things like that. I thought it was okay. I thought it was just okay. My biggest problem with the comic book, like I said, is I don't think there's anything offensive about it. I think there's some really interesting ideas going on, but like I said, just on a craft level, some things are a little cliche. Some of the symbolism is just so super obvious and things like that. Without giving things away, there's, like I said, the oncoming storm. It's Jim Crow, the strange visitor from the outer space, and things like that. And we know you can kind of guess what's going to happen when we get to the climax. This is part two of 4 parts, so you know. Um, that's another thing that was slightly disappointing, though I don't think it's anybody's fault. When I first heard about this comic book, I thought it was going to be kind of a standalone story, but it really feels like it's going to be an origin story. This is the second of 4 parts of the coming of this guy here. I'm pretty sure I can guess that if it does well, or if they have other stories to do, we'll probably get more miniseries. So, but like I said, it's. Oh, I also wanted to mention the art. The art I think is really great. You've got this sort of painted art thing, sort of art Alex Ross thing going on. I think the only drawback though is obviously technique wise it's excellent. You can't fault it at all, but it suffers from a little bit of the same thing that happens with Alex Ross when he does interiors, is that sometimes the illustrations are almost too realistic. So instead of looking like comic book art, it looks like exactly what it is, people in poses. So it kind of takes you out of the story a little bit. It's the opposite of art like. I better not show you that page. It's the opposite of art like this, which is all just lines on paper, and he's not really trying to be photorealistic, but you're drawn into that world. With stuff like this, you're taken out a little bit because it's very stiff looking in some places. It's like, you have people, I am talking to you now, and yes, and I am responding, and that is very surprising. And like I said, it's so obvious that that's what it is. Like I said, sometimes it takes you out of the story, but like I said, you can't fault the technique. The technique is Jones's technique is solid. It's super super solid. Okay, next comic book I got is Sam Wilson Captain America by Nick Spencer and Daniel Acuna. I've always liked Daniel Acuna's art, and Nick Spencer is a decent writer. I don't read everything he's written, but the stuff I have written, I thought is okay. This particular issue, I actually wasn't going to get at first, but I heard people going back and forth about it online, so I decided I should probably read it for myself. Basically, we're dealing with the aftermath of Sam Wilson has severed ties with SHIELD and with the government, and so he's kind of set up a hotline, and he's kind of sort of taking superheroing, to the people. Call me and I'll help solve your problems. And what's happening in the story is, some people are liking him and think he's really cool. Other people kind of hate him. You've got Maria Hill kind of sneering at him and things like that. And Sam thinking, his job as Captain America is to be, more of a voice for the people. And like I said, we're seeing how in some ways that's working for him, in some ways that's not working for him. Here you see where all sorts of conflict is going on. His approval ratings are going down, and so on and so forth. And at the end of the comic, there's a scene where he has to confront the sons of the serpent. For the most part, like I said, I did enjoy it. I thought it kind of laid out this sort of new direction for Sam Wilson in an interesting way, and I think a little bit more thought was put into the sort of, I guess, for lack of a better word, social political ramifications of Sam being Captain America. I think more thought was put into it than, say, Rick Remender did, or I've seen people try to do this sort of thing before in superhero comics and maybe not do such a great job, but I thought it was okay. I thought it was really interesting. I don't think I'm giving anything away here because this has already been on 9. It suggests that there's going to be some sort of rift between Steve Rogers and Sam, and obviously I haven't read the story yet, but I can kind of guess it'll probably be a thing where Steve is like, well, you're being too partisan, and Sam's like, well, no, this is the way I got to do it. It's probably going to be something like that. I think we all know it's all going to kind of climax with Steve taking over the mantle again. As you know, next year will be the 75th anniversary of Captain America. I think Captain America Civil War comes out next year, so of course Steve will be back. But it might be kind of interesting to see how this comic fares, up until we get to that point. All right. The other thing I got is I Hate Fairyland by Scotty Young. I got this comic book because I saw everybody else on YouTube talking about it, and I liked it. It's pretty fascinating. Of course, most people probably know Scotty Young from the variants that he does for Marvel, where he'll draw the um, characters as either babies or toddlers, and the Oz books he's done, and and I gotta admit, I like that stuff. I find a lot of it really, sweet and charming and adorable and things like that. And this comic book is the complete opposite of that. Basically, the premise is this little girl finds herself in Fairyland, and then she's trapped there for like 30 years. And so now she's got an angry disposition, and she's fighting against everybody in the most violent and over the top way. So it's basically just lots of crude humor and violence. Like I said, I got a kick out of it. It really kind of reminds me of like older underground comics and alternative comics stuff, like when they used to have like S. Clay Wilson and Pete Bag and stuff like that. I kind of wonder what the impetus was this for. There is kind of an editorial where Scotty Young talks about how he got into comics, talking about being obsessed with things like Mad Magazine and getting into things like the first wave of the Image comics when it was all Youngblood and the Max and the Pit and stuff like that. But I also kind of wonder because, like I said, Scotty Young's known for doing these kind of sweet, family-friendly covers and comics and things like that. I kind of wonder if it's sort of the thing like where you have like celebrities who get typecast, so they decide to kind of move out of that and do something the complete opposite. Where you'd have somebody like Robin Williams will, do a movie where he plays a serial killer or something. Or a lot of times you have actresses who are known for being, glamorous and very attractive looking. Then all of a sudden do a movie where they play some street junkie or something like that. So I wonder if this is like Scotty Young trying to kind of play against type. I'm the sweet baby guy. So, here's something where babies are being the opposite of what you expect. So anyway, what else did I get here? I got Welcome Back #2. Didn't read this yet, and I also got Starfire #5. I haven't read this yet. Let's see here. What freebies did I get here? I got the stuff they gave me. I got Omega. This is Omega Man #1, which I already have. This is Bizarro #1, I guess. I haven't read that. And I think this is Green Lantern's Rise of the Lost Army. Yeah, Green Lantern Lost Army #1. That's what it says in the legal matter down here. Okay, and for what it's worth, what do I got here? Back to the Fosters today. Okay, so that's it. Got to thank you very much for listening, and everybody have a great day.